So now what do we have in Ukraine? It's the same kind of lunatic schizophrenia hysteria where they're now being asked, Madame Harf was asked, you're taking the visas away from various Ukrainian government officials, but you haven't done anything about the gangs that are in the square. Yeah, she said, we're only interested in depriving these Ukrainian government officials of their visas. Well, wait a minute. Those are Nazi gangs. Those are neo-fascist goon squads in that square, and you're calling them democracy protesters? Again, it's just as crazy as saying everybody who dies in Syria, this is the responsibility of Bashar al-Assad. We have certified fascists, neo-Nazis, anti-Semites who dominate this scene. Right? Let's just look at some of them. They call themselves now, there's a certain geography of these things. It's like the difference between the two camps here in Washington, D.C., between McPherson and the Penn and Freedom Plaza, right? You're kind of different, right? One more moderate than the other. But there's one group which is absolutely neo-fascist. This is called the right sector, right-wing sector. It includes groups like the Patriots of Ukraine, the Trident Organization, Svoboda, meaning freedom, and similar groups. Let's just take one case that came up today. There is a guy called Chanibok, and I'm trying to give you this the spelling because it's not what you think. Tiahnybok. Tiahnybok. And it comes out Chanibok in Ukrainian. This is a certified fascist. He actually figures in published analyses of fascism in Europe in the past 10 years. A certified fascist. He is one of the leaders and maybe the leader of the Svoboda Party, which dominates this entire thing in the public square, which you have not been told. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So we're looking at this horrifying pattern, U.S. support for al-Qaeda terrorists in Syria and U.S. support for a fascist mob in the streets of Kiev, Ukraine, and other Ukrainian cities where these hooligans have now broken out. Some of the coverage on this stresses the violence. Well, violence is always deplorable, but the main thing is violence in the name of what? And it's in the name of fascist, neo-Nazi race theory, and that is this Svoboda Party. The Svoboda Party is the Social National Party of Ukraine. Yeah, social national, meaning national social, meaning national socialist. It is a neo-fascist party. Now, don't take my word for it. We have distinguished academics here. I have looked at the Internet. We have a distinguished book called Analyzing Fascist Discourse, European Fascism in Talk and Text by Wodak and Richardson, published by Routledge and Kegan Paul, I think, in London, or just Routledge these days, Routledge, Routledge, the London and New York publisher. And in this book, Analyzing Fascist Discourse, we find none other than our dear friend here, Alyeh Chanibok. The G gets very weak when you go down to those parts. So he's got speeches where he inveighs against the enemies of Ukraine. These include Moskali, meaning the Russians. He hates the Germans, interestingly enough, and he hates Jews. This is all Chanibok, and he's on record with this stuff. The other thing that this group does is their symbol, the so-called Wolfsangel. This is a runic sign which has certain affinities to the swastika. Just look up Wolfsangel, and you'll see what that looks like. They beat up their political opponents, especially labor organizers. If you're a trade union organizer, if you show a red flag, if you have any kind of pro-worker ideology, then our dear friend Chanibok is going to be there for you. So this is horrendous. Now, we've also got, at a somewhat different level, we've got this guy, Klitschko. Klitschko, as I have pointed out, would be a good candidate to become the head of the National Football League. This is somebody who has been punched once too many, right? He's a punch-drunk palooka. He may have some kind of damage as a result of these concussions that he's undoubtedly had. He has a residence here in the United States. He's got a green card. If he gets tired of it over there, he can come to the U.S., and he's got his principal residence seems to be in Germany, which is where he operates from. So a foreigner, right? He's not from Austria in this case, but he's from outside the country. That will be close enough. So this is what the State Department is hiding. Mademoiselle Harf is not telling you any of this because they're supporting fascists. What can we say? Why does the State Department support fascists and Nazis? That would be my question there in the briefing. And all of this being hidden. Here, another interesting thing is each side accuses the other side of arming provocateurs. The government essentially says that the demonstrators are preparing to assassinate some of their own people as a sympathy gag. And indeed, that may be what we had this week. 5 killed or something like that. The word on them is that the bullet wounds and the ballistics seem to indicate weapons not used typically by the Ukrainian army. It's not conclusive, but this is not far from being an open and shut case. Whereas the stock in trade of the protesters is that any crimes that are committed, right, any atrocities, are ipso facto by government provocateurs, and they even have a word for this, the Titushki. The Titushki, they are named after Vadim Titushko, who is a guy who beat up a newspaper reporter, and the opposition, the rebels there, the coup, in effect, in the streets, they say, oh, he was paid to do that. He was not really one of us. He was on the payroll for Yanukovych. This has now gone rather far, and I think what any observer would have to look at is, compared to the response, let's say, to Occupy Wall Street, or compared to the response to demonstrations that we've seen in Athens or in Madrid or in Paris, right, when we had the protest of the North African students in the banlieue of Paris some years back. This is a very soft response. These characters have been allowed to run wild. What we've essentially seen is not Mussolini's March on Rome, 1922, but Chanibok's and Klitschko's March on Kiev, 2013 to 2014. 5 or 10 minutes of serious police work would sweep these characters away, and eventually that moment will be reached. But this, of course, would be intolerable. And all of the Western governments that are protesting are absolute hypocrites, because their own practice would have been to shut this down much earlier. And, of course, the atrophy of the modern state. Suppose we have somebody like Barroso from the European Commission. I have pointed out Barroso, his political lineage takes us back to Salazar fascism also. He's got something in common with Teresa Heinz Kerry, right? There's a lot of fascist, what can we say, a lot of fascist heritage left in the world that seems to be raising its ugly head in this moment of civilizational breakdown. Barroso says if you don't respect the rights of these mobs, these fascist demonstrators, then I'll have to step in, says Barroso. I'll have to intervene. What does that mean? A lot of the rehabilitated fascists of Western Europe have found their way back into the European bureaucracy there in Brussels. Barroso being one of the key ones. This is, of course, outrageous. The behavior of the German ambassador to Kiev is outrageous. And let's not forget, Anders Aslund. Now we see what this evil gnome was doing. Remember, Anders Aslund, along with Jeffrey Sachs, was sent in to the collapsing Soviet Union to implement IMF shock therapy, right? Lots of shock, very little therapy, huge unemployment, huge human misery, destruction of the middle class, and so on. I saw it back in 1992, 1993 in Moscow. This Anders Aslund, you should take a look at his appearance on Crosstalk with Peter Lavelle on RT, and you will see that he is a boiling cauldron of rage against the Russians, and he wants to defend these indefensible demonstrators. Again, there's not a protest. This is now a coup d'etat. It is comparable to the Stavitsky affair. Remember the attack on the French National Assembly? Hey, in February 1934, so we're talking 80 years ago, next month, 80 years ago right now, we had the French fascist monarchists, right? The Croix de Feu of Colonel de la Roque, the Camelot du Roi, the various monarchists, the Action Française of Marat, all of them trying to break into the French National Assembly. This seems to be the model. So this is what Anders Aslund calls a democratic protest. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. That's your Ukrainian situation. A horrible, horrible pattern in Syria, terrorists supported by the State Department, and in Ukraine, fascist gangs. And as the Ukrainian Prime Minister has said, this is now a coup d'etat. This is the attack on the French National Assembly, February 1934, the so-called Stavitsky affair, and or Mussolini's March on Rome. This is the March on Kiev, and eventually this will have to come to a head one way or the other. Now, there's obviously a counterinsurgency strategy, or strategy may be too good a word. Let's look at the financier oligarchy of the world as they cavort in their Swiss paradise at Davos. And remember, Davos is the original Magic Mountain, the novel by Thomas Mann, that sanitarium up there for tuberculosis victims, Hans Karstorp and all the rest from Hamburg. That's up on Davos, der Zauberberg, so the Magic Mountain. And again, as Moalem says, the danger is when the magic turns against the magician. So what are the themes? Now, I found this highly, highly interesting. You know that I'm associated with the Perspective, which I announced for the first time really in New York City at the Left Forum back in June of last year, that there's a very good possibility that we're headed into a period of mass strike upsurge. When I say this to some people, they say, what's that? Well, maybe you've never seen it. Get some books, right? Get Rosa Luxemburg's The Mass Strike Party and Trade Unions to begin with, right? Read the history of the 1905 revolution in Russian Poland. Read the history of the Bolshevik Revolution. Read the history of the French Revolution. Read the histories of any of these events, and you'll get the idea. It can also be hijacked. What you're seeing in Ukraine is the same thing, really being hijacked by these right-wing demagogues. But we've had in the meantime that British think tank cited by the New Statesman in their article on Russell Brand, pointing to the fact that new protest movements, new social unrest is scheduled, they say, to emerge at the end of 2014. And Mélenchon of the French left party, Parti de Gauche, saying that France last year was in 1788, meaning that we're now in 1789, meaning that something big is about to happen. What does Davos say about this? Well, how interesting. They want to talk about risks. Their report is, of course, the yearly report, the Global Risks. That's the title of it, right? Global Risk 2014. You can and should get this also on the Internet. Take a look. And their conclusion is, in their own guarded language, right? Somewhat Aesopian language, not blunt, but elusive, that the income disparity question, income inequality, income disparity, can lead to social unrest. The despair and resentment from income inequality, income disparity, could easily boil over into social upheaval as seen in the wave of protests against corruption which have occurred from Brazil to Thailand and other parts of the world. That, in particular, you've got a lost generation of youth who are disgruntled, and their disgruntlement can lead to the dissolution of the fabric of society. This is what happens when the youth feel that they have no future. Now, the second issue that they have there is global warming. So we'll leave global warming, and we're going to set that aside and look at this question of the lost generation. Now, here's what they do, and this is interesting. Here on page 28 of the overall report, Global Risks 2014, we have what is in effect a mass strike watch around the world. They're very much aware of the mass strike, and they're looking at it. And they show you a map where the countries that have been hit by the mass strike are colored in orange. Countries with social unrest in 2013 selected, and it's ideologically selected. But then it goes like this. They give you a list. Let's just go through the list. Country, focus, and participation. How many people? So Egypt had a mass strike focused on leadership, right? Who should be president? 3 million participated. Turkey, focus was urban development and civil liberties. 2,500,000 took part. Brazil, focus was bus fares and corruption. 1 million took part. Argentina, focus was the judicial system. 1 million took part. Ukraine, economic alliances, what we would supposedly, this is really not the case, but this is their Aesopian stuff. Yanukovych, is he going to accept this colonial status of the European Union? 350,000. It's not that much, huh? That the best you can do, you oligarchs? Ukraine economic alliances, 350,000. Chile, educational system inequality. Remember this? Getting into college, 150,000. Thailand, corruption amnesty bill. This is the Sinawat, the red shirts and all this, 150,000. South Africa, labor unrest, 50,000. Russia, political prisoners, right? This is now Navalny and Pussy Riot and Femen, 50,000. Bulgaria, energy bills and corruption, 30,000. China, public services, and they don't know how many. Now, obviously, we didn't see anything here about Greece, about Cyprus, about the whole southern tier, right? Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, other places, right? How about the U.S., right? We probably had more people in the various fast food agitations or the various mobilizations against fascist governors than this shows. But anyway, you get the idea. They are attempting, as best they can, prisoners of their own oligarchical, financier, derivatives-based ideology. They're trying to monitor this stuff. So therefore, my proposal to you, what are they discussing in Davos? They are discussing counterinsurgency against this mass strike. Send in the clowns, right? Send in Grillo, Dieudonné, send in the various other clowns, send in demagogues, send in Chani Bok, send in whoever you can.